People believe silence means weakness, that if you don't speak up, you don't have anything worth saying. I let them believe that. I sat there while they laughed. I stood there while they judged. I smiled while they insulted me to my face and behind my back. They thought I was harmless. They thought I was powerless. They thought I didn't notice the whispers, the looks, the jokes disguised as honesty. What they didn't know was that every insult was being remembered, every humiliation was being stored, and every moment of silence was a decision, not a surrender. I stayed quiet not because I was weak, but because I was waiting. And when the truth finally came out, the ending was not what any of them expected. 1. The silence they mistook for weakness. I learned early that silence makes people uncomfortable. When you don't react, they lean closer. When you don't defend yourself, they assume they've won. And when you don't explain your pain, they create their own version of your story. That's exactly what they did with me. To them, I was the quiet one, the one who never argued, the one who always agreed, the one who smiled politely while being overlooked. At family gatherings, they talked over me. At work, they took credit for my ideas. At social events, I was the background noise, present but never important. And the insults, they were never loud. They were subtle, carefully wrapped in jokes and fake concern. You're too sensitive. You should speak more. People might respect you. You're lucky to even be here. They said these things while smiling, while sipping coffee, while pretending they were helping me. I remember one moment clearly. We were sitting around a table, laughing, eating, pretending to be close. Someone looked at me and said, "You're always so quiet. Do you even have opinions?" Everyone laughed. I laughed too, not because it was funny, but because I knew something they didn't. I had opinions. I had plans. And I had patience. That night, I went home and stared at my reflection longer than usual. I didn't see a weak person staring back. I saw someone learning, someone observing, someone slowly understanding the game everyone else was playing out loud. They underestimated me because I let them. Silence, I realize, is a mask, and masks can be powerful. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The insults continued. Some were direct. Others were disguised as advice. Maybe this is your limit. Not everyone is meant to succeed. You should be grateful for what you have. Grateful. That word stayed with me. Grateful for being ignored. Grateful for being mocked. Grateful for being underestimated. I nodded every time. I said nothing every time. And every time I stayed silent, they grew bolder. Because people confuse quietness with permission. They spoke about me as if I wasn't there. They made decisions for me without asking. They treated my presence like an afterthought. And still, I stayed silent, not because it didn't hurt. It did. There were nights when the words replayed in my head like a broken record. Nights when I wondered if they were right. If maybe I really was invisible. If maybe I deserved the way I was treated. But then something changed. I started noticing patterns. The loudest people were the most insecure. The cruelest jokes came from fragile egos. The ones who insulted others the most were terrified of being exposed themselves. And suddenly, their words lost some of their power. I stopped seeing them as judges. I started seeing them as distractions. While they were busy laughing at me, I was building something quietly. While they were talking, I was listening. While they were underestimating me, I was preparing. They had no idea. To them, I was still the silent one, the harmless one, the one who would never push back. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Because when people think you are weak, they never see what's coming. And trust me, what was coming would change everything. 2. When silence became an invitation. Silence changes how people treat you. At first, they test it carefully, like stepping onto thin ice. A small joke here, a harmless comment there. They watch your reaction closely, measuring how much they can get away with. When you say nothing, they take another step, then another. Soon, the ice isn't thin anymore. It's gone. That's when they stop holding back. I noticed it happening slowly, almost invisibly. The jokes aimed at me became sharper. The smiles lasted longer. The pauses after insults grew uncomfortable, not for them, but for me. They were waiting for me to finally break. At work, meetings felt like performances where I was the punchline. Someone would interrupt me mid-sentence and continue my idea as if it were their own. When praise came, my name was conveniently forgotten. Once I spoke up. Just once. I said calmly, "That was actually my idea." The room went quiet. Then someone laughed and said, "Relax, we're all a team here." Everyone nodded. And just like that, my words disappeared. I learned something important that day. People don't silence you loudly. They do it politely, with smiles, with rules, with phrases that make you look unreasonable for even trying to defend yourself. So I stopped trying. At family gatherings, it was worse. Family has a special way of hurting you while claiming love. They know exactly where to hit because they helped build the place you're standing on. They compared me, constantly, to cousins who earned more, to siblings who spoke louder, to people who fit their definition of successful. "Look at them," they'd say, glancing at me. "So confident, so accomplished." Then, pretending to care, they'd add, "You'll get there someday." Someday. Always someday. Never now. I became the example of what not to be. The cautionary tale. The quiet disappointment no one openly acknowledged, but everyone understood. And the more I stayed silent, the more comfortable they became with treating me that way. That's the dangerous thing about silence. It teaches people how to treat you, even when that treatment is wrong. There were moments when I felt invisible even while sitting in a room full of people who claimed to know me. Moments when my presence felt optional, like a chair that could be moved or ignored. But inside, something was shifting. I stopped reacting emotionally and started observing strategically. I noticed who spoke the loudest when they felt threatened. I noticed who laughed the hardest when they felt insecure. I noticed who needed an audience to feel important. And slowly, painfully, I understood something that changed everything. They weren't strong. They were loud. There's a difference. The louder they became, the quieter I grew, but not in the way they thought. My silence stopped being passive. It became intentional. I listened more carefully. I remembered more details. I learned people's weaknesses simply by letting them talk. When someone insults you openly, they show confidence. When someone disguises insults as jokes, they show fear. Fear of being challenged. Fear of being replaced. Fear of being exposed. And they were terrified of exposure. The insults escalated. One day, someone said to me, "You know, you're lucky people even notice you." I smiled, not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew something was coming. I was working longer hours than anyone realized, studying things no one asked about, building skills no one thought I had the discipline for. I didn't announce it. I didn't post about it. I didn't hint at it. I let them believe I was stagnant. Because nothing makes people careless like underestimating someone they think they've already defeated. There were nights when doubt still crept in. Nights when exhaustion whispered that staying silent wasn't strength, it was self-betrayal. But every time I thought about speaking up, I asked myself one question. Would they listen now? The answer was always no. So I waited, not because I was afraid, but because timing matters. Then came the moment that changed everything. It wasn't dramatic at first. No shouting, no public humiliation. Just a casual conversation that crossed a line they didn't realize existed. Someone said, laughing, "Let's be honest. You'll never really amount to much. You're just background." The word hit harder than any insult before it. Background. Something snapped, not outwardly, but internally. For the first time, my silence felt heavy. Not patient, not strategic. Heavy. And in that moment, I made a decision. I would still stay silent, but not for long. Because the people who insult you when you're quiet never imagine what you'll say when you finally speak. And when I did, they wouldn't recognize me anymore. 3. What they never saw me building. There's a strange freedom that comes when people stop expecting anything from you. No pressure to impress. No eyes watching closely. No one questioning what you're doing because no one thinks it matters. That was the space I learned to thrive in. While they were busy underestimating me, I was building something quietly, not in public, not with announcements or promises. In the small, unglamorous hours when no one was paying attention, I stopped talking about what I wanted to become and started working on who I was becoming. Every insult became fuel. Every dismissal became motivation. Every laugh became proof that they still had no idea. I woke up earlier than usual, stayed up later than I should have, learned skills no one around me valued. Yet, I studied patterns, systems, people. I asked questions silently and found answers where no one thought to look. And the most important thing I built wasn't success. It was discipline. Discipline to stay quiet when I wanted to defend myself. Discipline to keep moving when no one noticed progress. Discipline to believe in results that didn't exist yet. People assume silence means emptiness. They never consider that silence might be full of planning. At work, I became efficient in ways that went unnoticed. I solved problems before they reached meetings. I fixed mistakes before they became crises. I documented everything, not to show off, but to remember. I knew the day would come when memory would matter. At family gatherings, I listened more than ever. I learned who respected me when no one was watching. I learned who only valued appearances. I learned who would disappear the moment things got uncomfortable. And I stopped trying to earn approval. Approval is a currency controlled by insecure people. Respect is something you build when you stop begging. There were moments when I almost broke my silence. Moments when I wanted to say, "You have no idea what I'm capable of." But I reminded myself of something important. If I spoke now, they would doubt me. If I waited, they would question themselves. That difference mattered. Slowly, things began to change, not for them, but for me. I walked differently. I listened differently. I carried myself with a calm I hadn't felt before. And people noticed, not consciously, but instinctively. The jokes didn't stop, but they softened. The interruptions still happened, but with hesitation. The insults came wrapped in laughter, but with uncertainty behind them. They sensed something shifting, even if they didn't understand what. One day, someone asked me casually, "So, what are you working on these days?" The question surprised me. It was the first time anyone had asked. I smiled and said, "Just learning." They laughed and changed the subject. That was perfect, because learning was exactly what would change everything. Behind the scenes, opportunities started lining up. Small ones at first. A chance to take on more responsibility. A moment to step into a gap no one else wanted. A problem no one else could solve. I said yes to everything, quietly. I delivered results without asking for credit. I let others take the praise. I watched how quickly people revealed their true nature when they thought success belonged to them. And I remembered everything. Because silence doesn't forget. There was one night I sat alone and realized something that made me smile for the first time in a long while. I no longer felt small. The insults still existed, but they no longer defined me. They sounded distant now, like echoes from a room I had already left. I wasn't waiting for validation anymore. I was waiting for the right moment. And then, without warning, that moment began to approach. A major opportunity appeared. One that would force everyone to see me differently. One that would put me directly in the spotlight they never believed I deserved. They didn't know yet. They still laughed. They still underestimated. They still spoke as if I wasn't a factor. But for the first time, I wasn't just listening. I was ready. Because the most dangerous thing you can do to someone who underestimates you is succeed quietly. And soon, silence wouldn't be enough anymore. For the moment they couldn't ignore. Opportunities don't announce themselves with applause. Most of the time, they arrive quietly, disguised as responsibility, risk, or inconvenience. That's how this one came to me. A project no one wanted. Too complicated. Too risky. Too visible if it failed. Everyone avoided it. Everyone except me. When my name was mentioned, there was laughter. "Are you sure?" someone said. "That's a lot for them," another added. "Maybe we should give it to someone more confident." I stayed silent, not because I agreed, but because I didn't need permission. I accepted the responsibility without making a speech, without promising results, without trying to impress anyone. That made them even more comfortable. They assumed failure was inevitable. What they didn't see was how ready I had been for this moment. Every late night, every quiet lesson, every insult I had swallowed, it all led here. The pressure was immediate. Deadlines stacked up. Expectations were low, but scrutiny was high. People watched closely, not to help, but to witness the collapse they were certain would come. I worked differently. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I didn't announce progress. I focused. Problems that seemed impossible to others unraveled quietly in front of me. Patterns revealed themselves. Solutions appeared where no one else thought to look. Still, I said nothing. In meetings, people spoke over me until they realized they needed my answers. At first, they asked reluctantly, then more often, then with concern. Something was changing. The jokes slowed down. The laughter felt forced. The smiles didn't reach their eyes anymore. They started checking my work, then double-checking, then asking how I was doing it. I kept my responses simple, neutral, calm, just organizing better, just paying attention. Nothing special. That frustrated them more than confidence ever could. Confidence invites challenge. Calm certainty invites fear. One day, someone tried to undermine me publicly. They questioned my approach in front of everyone, expecting me to freeze like before. I didn't. I explained my reasoning clearly, slowly, without emotion. For the first time, the room listened. Not because I raised my voice, but because my words made sense. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy. I saw it then, the shift I had been waiting for. Not admiration, not respect yet. Uncertainty. They weren't sure who I was anymore. At home, family members started asking different questions. "Work going okay? You seem busy lately. Are you doing well?" Their tone had changed. Not supportive, not proud, cautious. Success threatens people who built their identity around being ahead of you. I felt the weight of expectations increase. People who once ignored me now watched closely. Some offered help, too late. Others tried to take control, too obvious. I refused both politely. The closer I got to finishing the project, the more desperate they became. Last-minute suggestions, sudden interest, forced friendliness. I recognized it immediately. Fear wears many disguises. The day I submitted the final work, I didn't feel excitement. I felt calm, because I already knew something they didn't. This wasn't just good. It was undeniable. And when the results came back, they didn't whisper. They spoke loudly. Praise I never asked for. Recognition I didn't chase. Attention I wasn't seeking but had earned. I watched their reactions carefully. The forced smiles, the tight jaws, the sudden silence from people who always had something to say. They congratulated me, some sincerely, some painfully, but none comfortably, because the version of me they had created in their minds no longer existed. And this was only the beginning. They thought this moment was surprising. They had no idea what was coming next. 5. When praise turned into poison. Success changes the room before it changes your life. I felt it immediately. The same people who once ignored me now watched every move I made. Their compliments sounded rehearsed. Their smiles arrived late and left early. The energy around me shifted, subtle but unmistakable. They weren't happy for me. They were threatened. At first, it was small things. A missed email I was supposed to receive. A meeting scheduled without my name on the invite. Decisions made quickly quietly without my input. Accidents, they called them. I called them patterns. The jokes came back too, but different now. No longer dismissive, they were sharp, careful, designed to remind me of where I came from. "Don't let success change you," someone said, smiling, as if I hadn't changed already, as if they hadn't pushed me to. I stayed calm. I stayed observant, because jealousy never announces itself loudly. It hides behind concern, behind advice, behind forced laughter. Someone warned me privately, "Be careful. People are talking." I thanked them, not because I was afraid, but because now I knew exactly who to watch. Pressure increased. Mistakes that had been ignored before were suddenly highlighted. My work was scrutinized harder than anyone else's. Standards shifted without notice. Expectations rose without explanation. I was no longer invisible. I was inconvenient, and inconvenience makes people reckless. Someone tried to take credit for my work in a meeting. They spoke confidently, assuming I'd stay quiet like before. I didn't interrupt. I waited. Then, calmly, I opened my notes. Dates, files, proof. I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I simply explained. The room went silent again. That silence felt different now. This time it belonged to me. After the meeting, apologies came. Some real, some forced. But the damage was done, not to me but to them. People were paying attention. At home, family dynamics shifted too. They asked about my plans now, about my future, about money, always money. The same relatives who once compared me unfavorably now asked for advice. I listened. I answered politely, but I didn't forget, because people who respect you only after success never respected you at all. There were nights when exhaustion hit hard, when I questioned whether staying calm was worth it, when the weight of being watched became heavier than the insults ever were. But then I remembered something important. They were reacting. I was still in control. Every attempt to undermine me revealed more about them. Every whisper strengthened my position. Every forced smile confirmed that my silence had transformed into something they couldn't predict. One evening, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. My name, their frustration, their fear. "Something's different about them," someone said. "They're not backing down," another replied. I smiled, not out of pride, out of certainty, because once people realize you're no longer easy to control, they panic. And panic makes mistakes. I knew then that the next phase would be dangerous. Not physically, strategically. People would push harder, play dirtier, try to provoke a reaction. They wanted me emotional. They wanted me loud. They wanted me to become the version of myself they understood. I refused, because the calm version of me scared them more, and they had no idea just how close they were to the moment that would expose everything. 6. The day silence was put on trial. There comes a moment when staying quiet feels more dangerous than speaking up. That moment arrived without warning. It started like any other day. Normal conversations, familiar faces, the kind of calm that feels suspicious once you've lived long enough to recognize patterns. I walked into the room and felt it immediately. The tension. Eyes followed me, not openly but enough to notice. Conversations stopped when I passed. Smiles appeared too quickly, like masks thrown on in a hurry. Something was coming. When the meeting began, I realized I wasn't there to participate. I was there to be tested. They questioned my decisions publicly, one by one. Calm voices, sharp words, framed as concern, but aimed to corner me. They brought up small issues, exaggerated risks, half-truths dressed as responsibility. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me defensive, emotional, loud. I stayed still. I answered clearly, slowly, without anger, without apology. Every answer landed heavier than the one before, but they didn't stop. Someone finally said what everyone else was circling around. Do you really think you're ready for this level of responsibility? The room held its breath. This was the moment they expected me to shrink, to doubt myself, to retreat into the version of me they remembered. I didn't. I met their eyes and said calmly, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. No justification, no explanation, just truth. The silence that followed felt different from before. It wasn't uncertainty this time. It was realization. They had miscalculated. After the meeting, pressure didn't ease, it multiplied. Emails questioning decisions, sudden deadlines, requests framed as urgency but designed to overwhelm. They were pushing. Hard. At home, I felt it too. Family members warned me to stay humble, to not make enemies, to remember my place. That phrase again, my place. I realized something painful that night. Some people prefer you quiet not because they dislike noise, but because your growth reminds them of their limits. For the first time, I felt anger rise sharply. Not explosive, focused, controlled, the kind that demands direction. I considered breaking my silence publicly, exposing everything I knew, naming every insult, every attempt to undermine me. I could have, and for a moment I wanted to. But then I remembered why I stayed quiet in the first place. Because noise creates chaos, silence creates pressure, and pressure reveals truth. The next day, they tried again, this time more openly. A challenge disguised as an opportunity. A task designed to fail. No support. No margin for error. They were daring me. I accepted. Not because I wanted to prove them wrong, but because I knew something they didn't. I had already survived worse than failure. I had survived being invisible. As I worked through the challenge, something unexpected happened. People started watching, not to see me fall, but to see what I'd do next. Even those who doubted me couldn't look away. Silence had turned into presence. When the results came in, they couldn't deny them. Again. But this time, denial wasn't the reaction. Fear was. Because it wasn't luck anymore. It wasn't coincidence. It was consistency. And consistency threatens systems built on hierarchy and control. That's when I knew. They wouldn't just test me anymore. They would confront me. Directly. Publicly. Soon. And when that moment came, silence alone wouldn't be enough. 7. When they finally tried to break me, they chose the stage carefully. A room full of people. Decision-makers present. No escape. No privacy. If I was going to fall, they wanted witnesses. I walked in already knowing what this was. Not because someone warned me, but because pressure always announces itself before it arrives. The conversation started politely. Compliments. Acknowledgments. Carefully chosen words to soften what was coming next. Then the tone shifted. They questioned my methods again. This time more directly. Less disguised. They brought up concerns that had already been addressed. Mistakes that weren't mistakes at all, and risks that existed only in their imagination. They spoke confidently, because they believed confidence was enough. They expected me to defend myself emotionally, to argue, to over-explain, to show fear. I didn't. I let them finish. Every word they spoke only built the case against themselves. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't react to the disrespect woven into their tone. I stated facts, timelines, results, outcomes. I explained decisions clearly and calmly. I referenced data they didn't expect me to have. I answered questions they hadn't planned for. One by one, their arguments collapsed, not dramatically, but decisively. The room noticed. The shift wasn't loud. It was subtle. People leaned forward. Pens paused. Eyes moved away from them and toward me. That's when fear became visible. Someone interrupted me, sharply, trying to regain control. Their voice rose. Their words became less careful. I stopped speaking, not out of fear, out of strategy. I let them talk. The longer they spoke, the more unbalanced they sounded. The louder they became, the clearer the contrast grew. And everyone saw it. Calm doesn't need to compete with chaos. When I spoke again, it was brief. I'm open to feedback, I said, but I won't accept accusations without evidence. Silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, the deciding kind. They had none. That was the moment the room changed sides. Not because they liked me, but because they trusted clarity more than noise. After the meeting, people approached me quietly. Words of support, subtle nods, respect that didn't need to be announced. The ones who had tried to break me avoided eye contact. At home, family reactions shifted too. Pride appeared where doubt once lived. Questions replaced comparisons. The tone softened, but something inside me remained steady. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, because I finally understood something. The goal was never to make them respect me. The goal was to stop letting their opinions define me. They thought confrontation would expose me. Instead, it exposed them. And still, this wasn't the ending. Because people who lose power quietly often try one last move. And I could feel it coming. 8. Their final move. When people realize they're losing control, they don't retreat. They escalate. I felt it before I saw it. The sudden quiet. The forced distance. The way conversations stopped including my name altogether. This wasn't respect. This was strategy. They were planning something. It started subtly. A decision reversed without explanation. Access restricted. Information delayed just enough to cause problems. They were trying to set me up to fail without touching me directly. If things went wrong, it would look like my fault. And if things went right, they would take credit. It was their last move. The pressure was intense. Every outcome now carried weight. One mistake wouldn't just hurt my reputation. It would confirm every insult they'd ever thrown at me. I understood the game immediately. They weren't attacking my work. They were attacking my timing. So I adjusted. I double-checked everything. Documented every interaction. I stopped assuming good intentions and started preparing for bad ones. Not emotionally, strategically. I stayed calm on the outside. Inside, I was focused like never before. Then the moment came. A critical decision point. Public. High stakes. No room for error. They framed it as collaboration, but it was a trap designed to force me into a corner. They expected hesitation. I didn't give them any. I spoke clearly, confidently, not aggressively, decisively. I presented facts, anticipated objections, addressed risks before they were raised. I didn't leave space for manipulation. The room went quiet again, but this time it wasn't uncertainty. It was recognition. Someone asked a question meant to expose weakness. I answered it before it fully formed. Another tried to redirect the conversation. I brought it back without confrontation. Control shifted in real time. I watched it happen. The people who had orchestrated this final move realized something terrifying. They had run out of options. Because when preparation meets opportunity, sabotage loses its power. After the meeting, the fallout was immediate. Not explosive, silent. Authority realigned. Conversations changed. Decisions no longer went around me. They came through me. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. And the ones who once insulted me stayed quiet now. Not out of respect, out of defeat. I went home that night exhausted but clear-headed. The war wasn't loud, but it was over. Or so I thought. Because the ending they expected, my collapse, my exposure, my failure, never came. The ending that came instead was something none of us saw coming. 9. When the truth spoke for itself. The truth doesn't announce itself. It waits. It waits until denial becomes impossible, until excuses run out, until even the loudest voices can no longer talk over reality. That's when it speaks. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. The results did it for me. The outcomes, the consistency, the calm decisions that held everything together when pressure peaked. People stopped asking if I belonged. They started asking how I did it. Meetings felt different now. Not confrontational, not dismissive, attentive. My words weren't interrupted anymore. My ideas weren't borrowed without credit. They were respected. The people who once insulted me sat quietly, not because they had changed, but because they had nothing left to say. At home, the shift was just as noticeable. Family members spoke to me differently. Their advice turned into questions. Their comparisons disappeared. The same relatives who once saw me as background now mentioned my name with pride. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure, because the validation I once wanted no longer mattered. I had outgrown it. There was one moment that stayed with me. Someone who had openly doubted me earlier looked at me and said quietly, "I didn't think you had it in you." They meant it as a compliment. I took it as confirmation. Confirmation that staying silent had never been about fear. It had been about focus. The power balance had flipped completely. Decisions were trusted to me. Responsibilities expanded. Influence followed naturally, not because I demanded it, but because I had earned it when no one was watching. And the people who once controlled the narrative, they faded. Not dramatically, not publicly, just quietly, which felt appropriate. One evening, I reflected on everything that had happened. The insults, the waiting, the restraint, the moments I nearly gave in to doubt. I realized something then. Silence wasn't my weakness. It was my shield. It protected my growth while others wasted energy trying to feel superior. It gave me space to build something real while they underestimated me. They thought the story was about proving them wrong. It wasn't. It was about proving myself right. Still, one final moment remained. One last realization that would define the ending they never expected. Because the biggest surprise wasn't my success. It was what I chose to do with it. 10. The ending they never expected. I could have chosen revenge. I could have exposed every insult, every whispered word behind my back, every petty attempt to undermine me. I could have made them regret underestimating me, but I didn't, because the real victory isn't in proving people wrong. It's in proving yourself right. I stayed silent for so long, not out of fear, but out of patience. Not because I was weak, but because I was building. Not because I doubted, but because I knew the value of timing. And when the moment came, I didn't need to raise my voice, shout, or retaliate. My results spoke louder than words. My calmness carried authority. My consistency demanded respect. The people who once insulted me now approached me cautiously. Their jokes vanished. Their whispers disappeared. Their attempts to control me ended quietly, almost imperceptibly, because they realized power isn't loud. It's deliberate, measured, and unseen until the moment it matters most. I had stayed silent. I had endured. I had prepared. And now, the ending wasn't just a personal victory. It was a lesson in patience, resilience, and self-belief. I didn't just win against others. I won against doubt, against fear, against the version of myself that once questioned if I was enough. Success arrived silently, but it was undeniable. Recognition came not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. Influence came not through shouting, but through quiet mastery. And respect came naturally because it is earned, never begged for. Some may wonder what I learned through all of this. I learned that insults are temporary. Jealousy is loud but shallow. And those who try to diminish you often reveal more about themselves than they ever can about you. The most important lesson of all: silence is not weakness, it is strength in disguise. Timing is everything. And patience is the greatest weapon you can wield. I stayed silent. I watched. I waited. And in the end, I was never powerless. The ending they never expected wasn't chaos. It wasn't revenge. It was my quiet triumph, my success, my peace. And now I ask you, are you ready to let silence become your strength? To let patience guide you to victories no one else can imagine? To stop reacting and start building your power quietly, intentionally, and deliberately? If you are, start today, because the world will never notice what you're capable of until you decide to show it. Like this story if you believe silence can be your strength. Comment below your moment of patience and triumph. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire, shock, and teach powerful life lessons.